Piney was started by literally one man and one student, teaching them how to read, and each one brought one, and over time we expanded and we grew. The real exciting part of our work is that we were started by a black family. Our first major donor was a former slave, and we were started for the benefit of black people here in the Deep South in rural Mississippi. So Lawrence Jones, the founder, he went on to a program called This Is Your Life back in 1954. He talked about the founding of the school and the work he'd done here over the years, and they highlighted some of the real challenges that he faced during that time, but they also highlighted some of the real success stories. And at the end of that program, the host, Ralph Edwards, said to the listening audience, if everybody listening would send $1 to Piney Woods School, we can ensure that this work continues on into the future. And so some 700,000 people back in the 1950s sent at least $1. And that's how we got our first, sort of strong mailing list. Right, this was all pre-internet, right? Pre-social media, right? All of that stuff. So, so we started there, and now we're trying to renew some of that. Lawrence Jones, so that's him as an old man. Yeah, that's the founder when he was older. When he started this work, he only had $1.65, and so we have these little things around campus as a tribute to how a lot of perseverance, a lot of determination, tenacity is what you need in order to be successful. There are a number of books that have been written about Piney Woods and its history, by one of our alums. Miracle in Mississippi, The Little Professor of Piney Woods. One of the reasons why they say miracle in Mississippi is that the fact that we're still here is a miracle, but the fact that he made it through what he made it through is a miracle. In the I think it was 1918, he was sharing the word about this school in a local church here in Mississippi, and he was teaching people that education is power. Right? That knowledge is power.
It's dangerous rhetoric in the Old South.
It's dangerous rhetoric, right? And so actually somebody heard him doing that and a lynch mob assembled.
Wow.
They took him from the church to be lynched. Literally, they had fashioned the noose they had a pile of trash that they were going to stand him on and burn. And before they hung him, they asked him if he had, because he was a rare college-educated black man in rural Mississippi. And so you know how they say, okay, fancy words, you got something else you wanna say, why don't you speak now? And he actually explained this project to them that he was pursuing. And he talked about the impact that it would have on both African Americans in the state, but how it would lift the state as a whole, and how there were even white Mississippians who were supporting this work. And by the time he finished talking, right, they had a older white gentleman in the lynch mob step forward.
I don't think he's too gentle.
But here's what makes him a gentleman. He stepped forward and he said, actually, I've heard of this and I know what this gentleman is saying happens to be true. And I know some of these individuals who are supporting this work. We've made a mistake. And he was not lynched on that day. So that building right there, you see it has two colors of brick? Yeah. So a couple of things. One, every brick on that building was made by hand by students on this campus. Every single brick, right? Because we used to make brick from the clay, from the soil. Right. And we have, I can show you in one of the log cabins over here, we have the old brick making devices, machines that we would put them in to shape them up and all of that. And what happened with that building is a tornado took the top of that building way back in the 50s or 60s. And so they went to rebuild it. And when they, the brick that they use, so when brick first comes out, it changes in color over its time. And so the brick that they used, they thought would turn more brown, and it never turned its full brown. So you get kind of a two-tone building. But we left it that color because, again, it shows the resilience and the sustainability of a space like this. And that building, this building, the building behind us, about 75% of the buildings on this site were actually made by students. So there was a older black gentleman in the area. Everybody thought he was really mean but he was a serious businessman, is what it was. And he saw Lawrence Jones teaching kids out in the open how to read and write. And he decided to donate an old cheap shed, a log cabin, which is this structure that's now surrounded by another structure to protect it. But this log cabin structure was the original schoolhouse of Piney Woods and the original home of our founding family, Lawrence and Grace Jones. It was used for sheep at the time. People have said it maybe dates back to around the Civil War, maybe just after the Civil War. So in Mississippi in the early 1900s, there were not very many places for black people to get an education. And so people would find out about this place and come from far distances in order to get here. And so we began boarding people from the very start because it was the only way that when people came, you couldn't just go home each day. People would travel hours. People would get here in the dark of night, literally, right, in order to learn during the days of Jim Crow. So this is probably the oldest music instrument I have on campus. I don't know how old that piano is, but so when we see this, I bring students down here twice a year. And I do it not just because I want them to understand history for history's sake. I do it because I also want them to understand if the people who came before us can start with this, right? And even build just what you see up the hill, we have no excuse for not succeeding, right, with a brighter future. The land we stand on, including this old sheep shed. He gave not only this old sheep shed, but he gave the 40 acres that surrounded the sheep shed as the first gift of land to Piney Woods, right? This major gift of $50 to him in 1909, which was probably a nice little sum of money. In addition to our founder and his family being laid to rest here, the former slave, who was the first investor in this work, is actually laid to rest in a plot on this side of the log cabin. So the history is rich and vast, as you say, over a century. And we're super excited about being able to stand on those shoulders.